biographical introduction of our guest speaker. Mike will then be sharing his insight with us on how SMEs can survive the coronavirus crisis, before which we will have plenty of time for you to ask him any questions that you might have. Please refer to the instructions on the screen that you can see now for the 3 ways in which you can submit your questions for Mike, which we will do our best to answer as many as possible. Now, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to the Chamber's President, Eduardo Barachina.
Thank you very much, Hannah, and good morning, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to have today Mr. Cherry, Mike Cherry, Chairman of the Federation of Small Business in the United Kingdom. We're honored to have him today in what I believe is the first time we do something for the first time, the Federation of Small Business and the Spanish Chamber of Commerce in the United Kingdom. It is sad that we are doing this in these unprecedented and dramatic circumstances, but at the same time, I think it shows eloquently the resilience of many institutions to pull themselves together and do things together in very difficult and challenging times. 99.8% of the companies in Spain are small, medium enterprises. And I believe they are the unsung heroes of our economies. And to develop these and other issues, we will be listening carefully to what Mike has to say. We are honored to have Mike because Mike is frequently and constantly actually involved and engage with policymakers and politicians to ensure small and medium enterprises in the United Kingdom, or even beyond the United Kingdom, are getting the treatment they receive. I think sometimes we forget the contribution that the small companies do. And I think, for example, the Spanish companies, I mean, 90% of the Spanish companies of the chamber are made of small companies, and chambers of the Federation of Small Business demonstrate that a small company can be local and at the same time can be global or international. And it's thanks to institutions like the Federation of Small Business, or our chamber indeed, that small companies can go international. We are facing Brexit, we are facing COVID, and without further ado, I welcome the Treasurer, who will give a small introduction to Mr. Cherry, and we'll open later, following his contribution, the floor to any question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eduardo. Thank you, Mike, for joining us this morning. We are honored to have with us today Mike Cherry, the National Chairman of the Federation of Small Businesses, the FSB, and position has occupied since 2016. The FSB has been the voice of small businesses for over 45 years, and with a membership, correct me if I'm wrong, of around 150,000 members. It's an influential voice and a voice that is listened by the public administrations. Mike has been linked to the FSB for over 20 years, holding the offices of National Policy Chairman and Policy Director before his current role. As impressive as is his FSB career, his business career is equally remarkable, having run a successful timber and manufacturing business and WH Masons and Son, based in Barton-Trent. In these days of fast money and cashing in quickly, it's encouraging to see how Mike has run the firm successfully for over 40 years. His company is a testament to the resilience and long-term view of family businesses, as it was founded by Mike's great-grandfather, William Mason, in 1897, just 11 years after the foundation of our chamber. I am sure Mike can share some tips about how a company can survive not one, but many crisis periods as the one we are in. So thank you very much, Mike, for joining us this morning. As I said, we are honored, and the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nacho. And also my thanks indeed to Eduardo for inviting FSB and myself to be able to speak to you this morning. Clearly, as a small business owner, as well as being the elected national chairman of the FSB, or Federation of Small Businesses, I really am delighted to be here today to provide an overview of the UK small business experience in relation in particular to the COVID-19 crisis, along with the help that's available and the role of trade, we believe, in the recovery. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the FSB, as Nacho has said, we are the UK's largest business organisation with around 150,000 members that come from all regions and all sectors of the economy and from all 4 countries that make up the UK. Established over 45 years ago to lobby policymakers and government, we're a non-profit making and non-party political organisation that is led by our members, like myself, indeed for our members. And our mission is to help businesses achieve their ambitions. For the purpose of my talk today, it will be structured as follows. Firstly, I will outline how COVID-19 has impacted the operations of many small firms. Secondly, I will provide an overview and business experience of the various government support schemes. Thirdly, I will highlight what we as an organisation are doing to support our members and MISMEs more broadly. And finally, I will conclude with a few brief remarks on what is needed moving forward, including how we believe trade can be used and should be used as a tool to aid recovery. Clearly, the COVID-19 pandemic has created an incredibly challenging and critical situation for small business owners across the United Kingdom, as it has in Spain and many other countries across the globe. In particular, those in the retail, hospitality and tourism sectors, as well as for the self-employed and entrepreneurs. It has also showcased the adaptability and ingenuity of some small business owners who have adapted and have swiftly altered their business model and ways of working. For instance, we have seen traditional high street restaurants and producers in the food supply chain shift to a more omni-channel model as a way to survive, to those providing professional services like training using online communication tools. We've also seen other small businesses change completely to being able to support the national effort to tackle COVID-19. This ranges from those producing personal protection equipment and hand sanitizers, donating food and beverages to key workers, to those providing essential supplies to the most at-risk groups. What remains clear is that while the contribution of many small firms to the economy may be partially or fully curtailed by the pandemic, their willingness to contribute to their respective communities and adapt to their customers' needs has not faltered. Innovation and change are what small businesses are good at, aside from resilience in the face of major challenges. Nevertheless, it is important to remember that not all small firms will make it through this crisis unscathed, with a proportion, unfortunately, closing for good. This is why the system of support provided and its delivery is so essential to keeping as many firms afloat as possible. This should, over time, enable more businesses to get through to the other side of this crisis with a smaller direct hit to the economy and cost to the general taxpayer. It is important to keep in mind that the pandemic, as we are all finding out, is a fast evolving and changing situation, which is why the advice and help available is also having to adapt and change. Here in the UK, in terms of the main support schemes available for small firms, these include the following. Firstly, there is the Job Retention Scheme, which enables firms to furlough employees and apply for a grant that covers up to 80% of their usual monthly wage costs, with a cap of £2,500. This continues until August, but will also then carry through in some way to the end of October. Secondly, is the Coronavirus Business Interruption Loan Scheme, which supports affected small firms through access to loans and other kinds of finance, with a cap of up to £5 million. Under this scheme, the government guarantees 80% of the finance via the lender and pays interest and any fees for the first 12 months, with no repayments for the first 6 months. Thirdly is the recently announced bounce back loan scheme, which helps those small firms affected with loans of up to £50,000. Here, the government will guarantee 100% of the loan, and there won't be any fees, interest or repayment due in the first 12 months. However, you cannot apply for this one if you're already claiming under the previous one. Fourthly is the self-employed income support scheme, which provides those self-employed individuals affected, subject to qualifying criteria, with a taxable grant worth again 80% of their trading profits, up to a maximum, again, of £2,500 a month for the next 3 months. And people were able to start applying for that only yesterday. Lastly are those cash grants through the business rate system. And this includes cash grants of up to £25,000 for those businesses that qualify for the retail discount, and up to £10,000 for small firms that qualify for the small business rates relief. Now, business rates in the UK, as many of us know, are an upfront property tax based on notional rental values across all business property in the UK. In addition to the main support schemes, the government has introduced a range of other measures to cushion the impact and support businesses. This includes VAT deferrals, mortgage holidays, rent protections, and a moratorium on business rates for those in the retail, leisure, or hospitality sectors, research and development grants, and extra time to pay tax via HMRC's Time to Pay programme, which enables businesses to renegotiate with the tax authorities the time it can pay any tax liabilities over, instead of when they actually fall due if the business is in difficulty. Yet, of course, the package of support is not foolproof, and some businesses continue to fall through the cracks. For instance, the self-employment income support scheme does not include a company director who takes earnings in dividends, or those who earn over £50,000 in a year, and those without a tax return for the year 2019 onwards. On all these, it has been FSB with others at times inputting to government the struggles and issues that members and businesses generally are facing. And it is where our members' surveys are so critically important in adding to the evidence that we are able to present. This total package of support provided by the government is unprecedented, but it is only as good as its delivery. In other words, how and how quickly it gets into the hands of the businesses that need it most. Since the initial rollout, the way the support has been delivered can be characterized as mixed. For example, the initial coronavirus business interruption scheme has been plagued by a variety of issues. These include UK-based exporters, for instance, being initially excluded, low approval rates due to the practices of certain banks pushing their own commercial products, and difficulties with the formal application stage, as well as excessive time between applying and receiving a response. Given the 5.8 million small and medium enterprises in the UK, with only around half of those businesses who have applied actually receiving a loan, the scheme has had very limited success. Whereas, if you look at the job retention scheme, which run very smoothly since its launch on the 20th of April, we have praised HMRC for its efforts. The money has got back to the businesses when they said it would. As of last week, over 800,000 employers have successfully applied and are getting money transferred to pay the furloughed wages of over 6.3 million employees, and over 2/3 of those are small businesses. I'll turn now to the grants available through the business rate system. And again, as of last week, more than 600,000 SMEs have received their cash grants, with the largest number being for £10,000 per business within stipulated sectors. Many, though, outside of these sectors or within the supply chains to those sectors have not had this cash support. The rollout, which is in the hands of our local authorities, illustrates my initial point that the delivery of the support has been mixed. For example, some local authorities have issued over 90% of their grants money, whereas some have only issued 30%. Additional grant funding has now been given, but again, it is not available to all businesses, covering those in shared workspaces, business centres and incubators only. If we look at the Bounce Back Loan Scheme that became active on the 5th of May, Treasury figures indicated that 69,000 bounce back facilities worth over £2 billion were approved within the first 24 hours, a complete contrast to the interruption loan figures. Even with such a strong start, our members have still reported issues with application forms being hard to access or inquiries simply being acknowledged as a "we'll call you" message and nothing further heard. Clearly, there is room for improvement to ensure that the most vulnerable business owners are helped through this incredibly challenging time. So what has FSB been doing as an organisation to continue supporting our members and small businesses generally? Firstly, we continue to listen to our members right across the UK, gathering case studies and that evidence I referred to earlier, suggestions, queries, and feeding all of this back to government, the devolved powers, and local authorities. Secondly, we have put out a survey to gather evidence from members and non-members to understand the impact that COVID-19 is having on small businesses and whether they feel that the measures put in place under the support packages are adequate. This resulted in nearly 5,500 responses, the biggest response we have ever had to one of our surveys. And unfortunately, the results from this do not make good reading, with over 40% having to close at present, a third both saying that they may not reopen, and 7 in 10 taking up the support available to furlough their employees. Thirdly, we have set up our own coronavirus hub, which is open both to members and non-members. It's on our website, and this contains regularly updated information on the support available to small businesses, guidance for employers, frequently asked questions, many webinars, and links to resources, including that on mental health. Fourthly, we are also assisting our members through the range of commercial services available to them through their membership. This includes our FSB Care, which deals with mental health and wellbeing for our members, our legal helpline to assist them with any legal issues they may have, and FSB Cyber to ensure businesses are better protected and adequately fit under cyber problems. Looking to the near future, with lockdown continuing, we welcome the ongoing support from the government to provide those highly impacted small businesses with the necessary additional support, hospitality, pubs, bars and restaurants, as well as other sectors like leisure and the travel industry. For those sectors that are able to open in a socially distant, compliant way, it will take time for them to generate revenue when the economy is still suffering from a massive demand and supply shock, and with confidence across the general population low. Some businesses in the short term may be able to operate in part, but not in full, and their staffing will need to reflect that, as will the changes to the furloughing scheme. If part-time or partial furloughing is not introduced, and employers face the prospect of all their furloughed employees returning at the same time, there will inevitably be large-scale redundancies, the very outcome that the government has sought to avoid. Similar to other countries around the globe, it will be important to consider long-term stimulus with measures to generate demand and production, as well as to take advantage of opportunities presented by trade, and in particular, digital trade, as a tool for economic recovery. FSB knows from our existing research that trade is an essential tool to create prosperity, to increase the number of jobs, and social development between all nations. The economic and social gains from trade are also spread across global supply chains. Whether that be via direct exports or indirectly, trade is a vitally important driver for small businesses, as it enables them to diversify their markets, reach new customers, grow and become more competitive. As I mentioned during my initial remarks, COVID-19 has in a few cases stimulated newer ways of working and more use of digital technologies among some small firms. Yet if we want all small firms to have the ability to engage in digital trade, whether domestic or cross-border, a number of conditions need to be met. Domestically, this means having access to reliable digital infrastructure, such as fast broadband and mobile connectivity and coverage, access to the requisite digital skills, and greater adoption of digital technology. Internationally, this means tackling tariff and non-tariff measures that impact small firms, from issues relating to data protection, protection of intellectual property, delivery problems, those associated with receiving electronic payments from international customers, and different local taxation and customs issues. It will therefore be crucially important, if we are to bounce back from this crisis, that we are able to accelerate and remedy the issues that impact against small firms in digital trade. Small and micro business owners are ready to take on the opportunities presented by trade and help aid the national recovery. They just need the right support and policy environment to do it, which we outlined in particular in our presentation and our supporting report entitled Destination Digital, when I presented this to the WTO in Geneva last November. So I would like to thank all of you for your attention, and I very much look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much, Mike. It has been tremendously insightful intervention. And let's go straight ahead with some questions from our guests. So Ricardo Ena, and he has one question for you. And he appreciates, obviously, as we all do, your intervention. And do you think smaller companies are more or less prepared for this forced digital transformation?
I think what you're finding, as I mentioned, is that small businesses generally are very innovative. All they need to know is what support is available, how to do it, and more importantly, how the authorities can relieve the problems created by unfair practices, difficult customs regulations, changing local tax situations, and just enabling digital to actually work for the benefit of more small businesses. In the UK, again, according to our surveys, we could actually double the number of MSMEs who are able to engage in overseas exporting, and we need to make sure that the UK government puts in place the right support. And I suspect that is very similar in Spain as it is in many other countries at the moment. So FSB is working very closely indeed with others at the WTO to engage with the work schemes that are over there. And we are urging the WTO to actually form a MSME committee, as well as looking at how they can better support businesses in the digital economy.
Okay. Luis Viñuela asked you, how long do you think it will take for businesses to recover?
That's a very difficult one because, again, as I mentioned, it very much requires people to have confidence. The problem is that they also do a lot more online at the moment. So for those with physical premises, in retail in particular, they are going to struggle before trade comes back to normal. In hospitality sectors, it's going to be the autumn at the very least here in the UK before something like normal gets back. And I would suspect that it's going to be next year before we start to really see trade getting back to levels that we were used to before COVID hit.
Okay. Let me handle the voice to Ferran Foix from Meliá Pombo, who wants to make a question. He will join momentarily in a couple of seconds, and he will make his question. Okay.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thank you very much.
Hello, and thank you very much for this very interesting and insightful presentation. I wanted to know if after the survey made to all your members, there is a sense that the support measures having been approved by the government are adequate, and what other measures do you think will be necessary to continue supporting small businesses during this crisis?
Thank you for that question, Ferran. Clearly, most of the support measures that have now been put in place are very supportive of small businesses. The aim clearly is not to take a very large hit now, but to try and help small businesses get them and their people through this crisis. Clearly, there needs to be more flexibility, which we believe the government is going to introduce in the furloughing scheme from August, although there will need to be a contribution made by some businesses towards the cost of that going forwards. In some sectors, though, those businesses are closed because their customers are closed. And therefore, it will be important that the government adapts to recognize that and continue supporting those businesses until they are able to reopen, whether that be with social distancing or even whether it may be when a vaccine hopefully is available to us all in 2021. And that is a long time hence. So the support needs to continue in some way to ensure most businesses can get through this crisis, we believe.
Thank you very much. And next question will come from Gonzalo Coelho de Portugal, from the architecture company Binom. Gonzalo, are you with us? Let's see.
Hello, good morning. Thank you very much, Mike, for the talk. It's been very useful, very well organized, and a very broad picture of what is there and what is there to come. I was going to ask a specific question on one of the support schemes you mentioned, the one which is supported from the local authorities. If I am right at the moment, the local authorities are not accepting applications from companies which work from commercial centers or shared office spaces, which is a large number, because there's many of us which work under those conditions. And I was wondering if this is something which is now in the conversation, and if it is something that is going to change, or whether you see any development on that front.
There are many gaps, as I mentioned, with the grant support that is available under the business rates. FSB has been very successful over a long period now in getting reliefs for the smallest businesses. And therefore, the £10,000 grant that comes from our local authorities is available to all businesses that get those reliefs. The £25,000 is available to larger businesses. It gets technical here, but it's those larger businesses with a rateable value of under 51,000, and the rateable value is different to the rental cost. But the extra support that is now available is only just over £600 million that local authorities should now have. Some don't have the detail behind it, but that is specifically to cover those businesses that are working from shared spaces, and indeed on some industrial estates. It is a difficult area because there are many hundreds of thousands of small businesses still excluded from any grants or any deferment of this tax. And we continue to highlight those problems. particularly in areas like manufacturing, where obviously a manufacturer needs a lot of space and therefore attracts a higher proportionate tax compared to a small business just working from a small office. So there are gaps that FSB continues to raise for the grants that are available, as it does with the flexibility around furloughing and making sure that the banks are delivering what they need to get many thousands of businesses through this crisis, as I've mentioned.
Thank you.
And thank you very much. And our next question comes from Adam Monday from Meliá. This is quite relevant because Meliá hotel company would be hosting this event physically if it was not for COVID. So yeah, here we have Adam. So please Adam, go ahead with your question.
Hello, Mr. Cherry. Good morning. I look after 2 hotels in central London on behalf of Meliá Hotels International, a Spanish hotel company. Travel and tourism clearly have been hugely affected by COVID-19 as well as other industries. But technology, as you rightly mentioned, has proved a helpful opportunity to still meet, network, and talk to clients and other businesses, like we are today, in fact. However, exhibitions, meetings, dinners, events, face-to-face conferences are very important to the travel and tourism industry. How do you see the future of this particular element of this industry?
That really is a very leading question, Adam. Clearly, the events sector has been absolutely decimated by this. Until you can put in place social distancing, then there is no way that that sector is going to be able to even contemplate reopening. I still feel that events will come back, but you will have lost this whole season. And I would hope that in 2021, people will have worked out the best way to start doing this. Clearly, that also affects FSB because we have our national awards that were due to be held this month. Yes. And that, again, has had to be put on hold, where it recognises not just members, but small businesses across the UK and what they're able to achieve against a set measure of criteria. So that's our flagship event that highlights the great and the good across the small business environment. I mean, you are going to struggle, I have no doubt, across the hospitality sector, whether it's in restaurants, whether it's in hotels, let alone pubs. Pure and simply because even when you put in place social distancing, you are going to have less people in that space. If it's a restaurant, you'll have less covers. If it's a bar, at the moment, it still remains shut. And this is a sector that is only going to be able to recover slowly, and yet your fixed costs are going to remain. So viability and additional support to help you through this is going to be pretty critical to how we can get as many of you through as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Next question comes from Albert Cole from Banco Sabadell. So Albert, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. If you want, you can share your video as well. Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much.
Mr. Jerry, thank you very much for your comments. Very interesting indeed. And my question is, in the context of the programs that have been launched, the UK has made a very remarkable impact, but obviously the programs are only as good as how fast they can reach the recipients. And as you very well said, there has been quite a lot of operational challenges in terms of getting the monies to those that need it most. So I am very well aware by means of working in a bank that operationally, while the banks are being perceived as capable of doing everything that is required from them, The fact of the matter is that there are both technical and administrative challenges to make things easy, because the processes as they are designed are not easy. So from the perspective that the perfect is the enemy of the good, and the fact that companies are in an urgent need of this money, and also taking into account that other countries have done way better than us in the UK to get this money to those that need it. For example, the US has been writing checks to people, or Switzerland with their efficiency, they've basically been able to get the money really fast to the companies. Do we have a system to feed back both the banks and the government in terms of how we can streamline and simplify the processes so that we can get the money faster to the companies?
Yeah, you raise many facets there, Albert, and I thank you for that question, because clearly the banks, generally the main high street banks, are not equipped for a crisis like this. They have had their own issues, to be fair, in staff being off, and their internal processes sometimes have let them down. Clearly, FSB is absolutely key to enabling both government, whether that's being through the Bank of England, whether it's be through the Treasury, whether it's through the British Business Bank, and many others, including the banks themselves, where we have good engagement at the highest levels to understand the problems. And you'll have seen one or two banks being questioned about how quickly they've been able to support some of their customers. I think what we've seen with the CBILS intervention, there was uncertainty at the beginning on the processes required. Some were requiring individual companies to make pre-applications. Some were asking for their normal commercial trading loans to apply rather than what was intended under CBILS, which is why you then saw a change in how that was taken forward. But it still gave an average of about £165,000, which meant that the smallest businesses not only were not getting the money, but they were also clogging up the system. And that is why FSB and others very clearly pushed the Treasury and government, and why we saw the advent of the bounce back loan scheme come in, which was backed 100% by the government. It still has to be repaid by the business, and it's still owed by the business. But that enabled hundreds of thousands of businesses to get money very, very quickly in the main, within 24, 48 hours, and in the amounts that they needed. Clearly, this does raise a lot of questions, one of which is something FSB has championed ever since the last financial crisis 12 years ago, that within the UK, 85% of small business lending is by the main 5 high street banks. And we have championed alternates, whether it be fintech, whether it be challenger banks, whether it be peer-to-peers, in being able to come into the marketplace to get the finance to the businesses when they need it, without undue process, without having to give undue security, and to be enabling those businesses to grow and survive. So clearly there are lessons to be learned again from this, as in every crisis. We remain a country that is too reliant on the main high street banks, and we also have a very poor rate of getting equity into those businesses that can be scaled up and grow. And there's, in my opinion, too much emphasis put on venture capitalists rather than on business angels and other mechanisms to get businesses funding when they need it. So it's ongoing work to some extent. I think we've been very successful in getting the change to the CBILS loan scheme and bringing in the bounce back loan schemes. Clearly more support needs to be available to businesses. And many businesses will still be questioning without having a clearer indication of when they're able to restart, whether they obviously want to take on a loan, despite the deferment of repayments or indeed of interest charges and payments, whether they can afford to repay it. And many small businesses, I believe, will still be questioning that, particularly coming back to Adam's point about the hospitality sector. You mentioned the US. The US is different in as much as it has the Small Business Administration. They are an exemplar of how they support small businesses over there. And you also mentioned Switzerland. And the Swiss scheme is slightly different. Although it's got money very quickly to businesses, it's capped initially, I understand, at only 10% of your turnover. So for many small businesses, our 25% on the turnover on the business bounce back loans is a far better scheme, I believe, than the Swiss scheme, which seems to be a little bit restrictive, although it's very, very quick at getting money almost in the same day to the business.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Albert. Now we have another question coming. Actually, Luis Viñuela and Carlos Toral asked questions in the same direction. Do you think that small businesses have the logistics to establish online commerce?
This is a very interesting question. There are a lot more players in the marketplace to support small businesses now. Some of the platforms offer their own option for e-commerce. I think there are thousands of businesses who use it and use it very successfully. I think there does need to be a little bit more competition in there, and we will know some of the bigger players have their own rules and restrictions, which act in some cases almost against the small business. I think they just need to know who to trust and where to go to get that support. And I think you'll see many more businesses establishing online e-commerce sites for those who already have them, as we've seen, whether it be large retail chains, whether it be thousands of small businesses. It is one thing that has at least kept them going during this crisis compared to those who have only relied on a physical space.
Thank you very much. We have another question. One question that comes with the COVID crisis is the systemic change that there will be towards working from home, and office will be less relied on. The thing is that, and what's your perception on that, on the impact of many small businesses that work directly or indirectly for the office space, like from cleaning companies to small cafes around the office centers, etc. What do you think could be the long-term impact for small businesses of this working from home trend?
There is no doubt that there will be a massive change, I believe, to how we all operate. What this has proven is that for all of us who had plans in place where you can work from home, those plans have been enacted, and we are finding just how successful this can be. Today we are using Zoom. Within FSB at the moment, we use another platform, which is Blue Jeans. We have other platforms like the Microsoft Teams, and I think you'll see other players coming into this sphere, which will enable more people to be seen and shared on screen. And I think society generally will change and adapt, given the social distancing that is inevitably going to be with us for many, many months to come. And of course, for those with large office space, it does bring into question whether we need that physical presence. I think many large businesses in particular who do a lot of global travel by air with their executives and others will be taking a rethink now. And I know we've already seen media reports about some of the large property owners looking at how their percentage of people within those properties are going to drop, which means that their rental undoubtedly is going to have to drop, as is the government tax take, I suspect, on business rates, which I referred to in my speech. So I think generally we are going to see some massive changes in this side. And I think whilst you can never replace a good face-to-face discussion or negotiation, the world of video conferencing, virtual meetings is certainly here to stay and will be adapting as we go forward into 2021 and further. And it will be here to stay permanently, I believe.
Thank you very much. We have one last question, and it's around the impact of Brexit in smaller business that operate abroad. Do you think that if there is an additional administrative burden in terms of paperwork that you have to clear for exports, etc., that can lead to either a structural disadvantage for smaller businesses, or it maybe force smaller businesses to merge to get more economics of scale to face these challenges?
I think it depends very much, firstly, on whether the business is dealing in goods or in services. Inevitably, any additional customs procedure delays transit from one country to another or across any borders, as we've seen in Eastern Europe, even with COVID coming in, when the borders are slightly shut, then the lorry queues mounted up. And we will inevitably see that initially, I believe, from the UK, whether it be into France, whether it be into Spain, the Netherlands or elsewhere. But digital technology and AI will be a mechanism by which we can overcome a lot of this. Small firms lead in many areas of this, and we hope that the technology will enable delays to be minimized as time goes forward. Initially, there's going to be an impact, but many small businesses, whether they be freight forwarders, are here to also support and help other small businesses in getting their goods in particular across borders. And in the main, with the large carriers, those of us who already ship to other countries generally don't find that there is too much of a delay when someone else is doing the paperwork for you, albeit with some additional cost to the customer. So I think digitalization is going to be a mechanism, with small businesses in many cases leading the field on that. But short term, there's going to be some delays at the borders. There's no doubt about that.
Thank you very much, Mike. I think it has been a very impressive session. I think it has been most insightful for all participants. And now actually, sorry, if I may, we have a last question. Maybe we can do it quickly. Luis Viñuela asked that do you think it will be lower that the Bank of England lowers interest rates? Yes.
I personally don't believe the Bank of England will go any lower into negative territory. They can't go any much lower than 0.1% as the base rate. What I do think you will find is more quantitative easing being used again. There's a debate, obviously, within the UK whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. But any additional support at this moment, as I come back to the initial theme, is to get as many businesses through this as possible and out the other side, so that we can get the economy growing again as quickly as possible.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you also for the team of the chamber, especially to Hannah Sanders and Elena Marignan, that had made also this webinar technically possible. And now I will pass on the word to our president, Eduardo Barrachina, that will make some closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike, for what was an extremely interactive, detailed and interesting conversation between yourself and many of our members, some of them connected in Spain. As I said earlier, and Nacho reminded us, typically we should have welcomed you with a nice Spanish breakfast at Meliá hotels in central London. We can't do it now. We will invite you again in the near future. If one thing is very clear, Mike, is that there are many issues that we must address. We at the Chamber are equally concerned and worried, and we look forward to working together on a more closely basis. And this is the beginning. And I remind everyone that next week we will be hosting a seminar with the Right Honourable Nadim Sahim, Minister for Business and Strategy from BASE. Mike, you're very welcome to join us. Again, it will be interesting to speak to the Minister for Business and Industry. And in the meantime, Mike, on behalf of the Spanish Chamber of Commerce, our gratitude. Thank you very much indeed.
May I also reciprocate and thank you very much indeed, because as I said to Nacho on Tuesday when we did the pre-test, we are a great believer in international trade, whether it be for Spanish businesses, whether it be for UK businesses, and this gives us the opportunity to build on that. And we hope for a long engagement to support our members and indeed your members as we go forwards on this journey to get through this crisis and come out with a good economy, strong small businesses, all the other side. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you, Mike. Bye.